Exodus chapter 1, verses 8 through 22. Now a new king arose over Egypt, who did not know Joseph. He said to his people, "Look, the Israelite people are more numerous and more powerful than we. Come, let us deal shrewdly with them, or they will increase, and in the event of war, join our enemies and fight against us and escape from the land." Therefore, they set taskmasters over them to oppress them with forced labor. They built supply cities, Pithom and Ramesses, for Pharaoh. But the more they were oppressed, the more they multiplied and spread, so that the Egyptians came to dread the Israelites. The Egyptians became ruthless in imposing tasks on the Israelites, and made their lives bitter with hard service in mortar and brick and in every kind of field labor. They were ruthless in all the tasks that they imposed on them. The king of Egypt said to the Hebrew midwives, one of whom was named Shiphrah and the other Puah, "When you act as midwives to the Hebrew women and see them on the birth stool, if it is a boy, kill him, but if it is a girl, she shall live." But the midwives feared God. They did not do as the king of Egypt commanded them, but they let the boys live. So the king of Egypt summoned the midwives and said to them, "Why have you done this and allowed the boys to live?" The midwives said to Pharaoh, "Because the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women, for they are vigorous and give birth before the midwife comes to them." So God dealt well with the midwives, and the people multiplied and became very strong. And because the midwives feared God, he gave them families. Then Pharaoh commanded all his people, "Every boy that is born to the Hebrews you shall throw into the Nile, but you shall let every girl live." This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. This month, we're exploring a few biblical stories of people who resisted the powers that be, of people who wouldn't back down from what they knew was right and good for themselves and others. So today, we read the story of Shiphrah and Puah, two midwives who break the law to save the lives of children. Shiphrah and Puah are the midwives to the Hebrews living in Egypt, but it's not clear whether they themselves are Hebrew or Egyptian. But they live in Egypt, the most powerful empire in the Mediterranean at the time. Most everyone around the Mediterranean was under the sovereign rule of Pharaoh. And like conquering, colonizing rulers, Pharaoh was so afraid. He was afraid that someone might stand in his way to conquering more land and people, the land and people that he felt entitled to. He was afraid that anyone besides people with pure Egyptian descent might gain influence and power of their own in the society. So, because of all of this fear of losing power and control over others, he enacted a ruthless policy against the Hebrews who were growing in number. Here's the policy: all Hebrew boys must be killed at their birth. The midwives, Shiphrah and Puah, who are probably the leaders of many midwives who served the Hebrew people in Egypt, Shiphrah and Puah organized their team and came up with a plan. Their plan was this: lie. They continued to midwife all the Hebrew babies into the world. When Pharaoh confronted them, again attempting to wield his power over anyone who he saw as less powerful than him, the midwives lied. "These Hebrew women," they said, "they're so vigorous. They birth their babies before we can even arrive." The 9th commandment seems to have been broken here by the midwives. They bore false witness. They did not tell the truth. These women broke the law, outright defying the law of God, it seems, and of the land. So, why are these women venerated, celebrated in our sacred text? They are venerated because their ethics run deeper than the simple rules and new policies. Their sense of what is right comes from a place of fearing God. Pharaoh feared losing his own power, which caused him to oppress and enslave and imprison and kill people. The midwives, on the other hand, feared God. The midwives knew that no matter how miserable Pharaoh could make their lives, God had an even greater power to bless their lives exponentially more. And Pharaoh's threats and policies could not threaten that as long as they did what was right in the eyes of God. Pharaoh could never bless them like God could. Their resistance saves lives, including the life of baby Moses, who was born at the time of Pharaoh's second death-dealing policy, that all Hebrew boys are to be thrown into the Nile. All Hebrew baby boys are to be killed. It sounds maybe by his own military or by Egyptian citizens walking down the street, proving he is no longer dependent on incompetent women to carry out his dirty work. And so many lives are lost. So many parents lose children despite the midwives' resistance. This story, the plot, should sound familiar to you. This story is a story that is specific to a time and place, and it is a universal story. A story that happens cyclically, over and over again. Powerful but cowardly leader arises into power, never satisfied with the power they already have. Use that power to enact death-dealing policies against people they decide don't belong there. Those othered people resist. Those othered people and their children die until there is an uprising, a liberation. We are living this story now, here. It is tempting to read this story and see ourselves only as the midwives. And I think some of us are. Some of us are actively resisting the draconian policies of our country. Some of us are breaking the rules, breaking the law, speaking up and speaking out for the most vulnerable. Some of us are giving diapers to mamas and their babies so they don't have to suffer more than they have to. Some of us are the parents in this story, birthing children, ideas, communities into a terrifying and dangerous world. Some of us have lost children to death. Some of our children have died because of death-dealing policies and cultures. Some of our children have died because of our country's refusal to address widespread causes of death. Some of us are like Pharaoh and his cronies, afraid that someone else's thriving means our suffering, grabbing power wherever we can, asserting our power over others, worshiping our own status more than God. But truthfully, I think that most of us are those non-Hebrew Egyptians in the background of this story, completely oblivious, or at least having a sense of helplessness to the death-dealing policies that don't affect us and our children directly. We are silent in the face of grave injustice, especially after the news cycle changes. The fact is that we are often not the heroes or the sheroes of the story going on around us. Our children may not grow up to be like Moses, liberators of the most vulnerable, but other people's children will. The children who are most vulnerable, born into death-dealing policies, who know the grief and weight and anger of living under oppression. The children who only fear God, they will liberate their people from this inhumane world we have accepted by our inaction. But all is not hopeless for us. We have the power to write a different story. We have so many chances to write a different story. With every news cycle, we have the chance to write a different story. There's a new podcast out called Nice White Parents. The investigative journalism reveals that the one thing standing in the way of a just and integrated school system in our country is nice white parents. In one New York City school district, the reporter tells of a long history from the time of the passing of Brown versus Board of Education to today, of so many instances of nice white parents getting in the way of their own professed ideals. The final episode, however, tells a different story. Once the unjust system of school choice finally touched their own children in a negative way, a group of these nice white parents got together and figured out their own collective political power. These nice white parents organized to diligently lobby the school board, the Department of Education, and the school district's superintendent to restructure the entire system. In just a few years, their lobbying efforts changed the entire system. The entire district enacted a more just school zoning system, finally integrating schools 65 years after Brown versus Board of Education was passed. You see, we have more power than we can imagine. We have more political influence than we can believe. And I think that we fear God. At least we are people who desire to fear God more than we fear Pharaoh. We are capable of shaping our communities in the way of justice, righteousness, and flourishing life. May Shiphrah and Puah give us the wisdom to know deeply in our bones what is right, the courage to actually do what is right despite the consequences, and the grace to walk alongside suffering people in unshakable solidarity. God's nurturing love will overflow into the world and into the systems and structures around us through our acts of solidarity with the most vulnerable in our midst. May it be so. Do all the good you can, by all the means you can, in all the ways you can, in all the places you can, at all the times you can, to all the people you can, as long as ever you can. In September, we'll begin a new worship series we're calling With All Creation. We're going to partner with several other congregations and be guided by the four elements: air, water, earth, and fire. So we're asking you to send in pictures, audio, or video of what air, water, earth, and fire look or sound like from where you are. So if you travel or if you're staying at home, please send in your pictures of air, water, earth, and fire to Pastor Alexa. Additionally, during this series, we're going to make a community mural that will look like this one right here. So if you're willing to take a panel and paint it, let me know and I will get you all the supplies you need so that we can make this mural together. Do you or someone you know need a tank of gas? Due to a grant we received from the Pacific Northwest Conference, you can get gas cards at the Ording Family Support Center. Call Shannon to schedule a time and location for pickup. Our church has a new hygiene closet in which we're distributing hygiene supplies and diapers. And the upcoming dates for that are Saturday, August 29th from 10 to noon and Tuesday, September 15th from 5 to 7 p.m. Please consider financially supporting our ministry and mission. We couldn't do what we do without your support. You can give online at this link, or you can give by texting the amount you'd like to give to 253-300-4700, or by mailing your gift to the church's P.O. Box, P.O. Box 537, Ording, Washington, 98360. Thank you so much for your financial gifts and gifts of time and service. We really couldn't do this without you. Please don't hesitate to reach out to me, Pastor Alexa, at this contact information. Go into the world, resisting all evil wherever it is found, whether in ourselves or in others. May God's nurturing love overflow to our communities. Amen.